Latest news hit that social. Make sure you smack that like button on your way in. Welcome back to Indie Appleseed TV. Race to 25K subs starts here. Let's jump straight into this live stream by Tiffany Red. She's a songwriter for some of the A-list celebrities, but she actually had the paperwork to Dawn case against Diddy. Now, we all know Dawn from Danity Kane. She's actually filing this lawsuit. She filed under distress, harsh work environment. The list goes on. Now, keep in mind, this was 58 pages, so we're just going to get into some of the juiciest parts. Seems like Dawn was friends with Cassie. She was there to witness a lot. If you missed it, let's jump straight into this live stream. My love goes out to Danity Kane. We heard these rumors for a long time, but we never really got the substance behind it. Let's get into this paperwork. Hit that like, hit that sub on your way in.
Defendant Sean Combs, a once celebrated hip-hop mogul popularly known by his stage name Puff Daddy, Puffy, P. Diddy, or Love, skyrocketed to fame in the late 1990s and became a powerful and enduring figure in the music and entertainment industry. In 1998, Mr. Combs explained the origins of his stage name in a USA Today interview. His nickname was Puff because he had a temper and was known to huff and puff when he was angry. Over the decades following his rise to fame, Mr. Combs' star-studded, larger-than-life persona overshadowed his vicious temper and pervasive acts of violence directed towards those in his inner circle, specifically women. Mr. Combs' namesake temper frequently manifested in physical violence. Mr. Combs regularly hurled objects in a fit of rage, often throwing items such as mobile phones, laptops, food, and studio equipment across the room or at people. On numerous occasions, Miss Richard witnessed Mr. Combs brutally beat his girlfriend, Miss Ventura, Miss Cassandra Cassie Ventura. His persistent abuse included choking and strangling Miss Ventura, striking her with his hands and with objects, slapping her, punching her, and throwing items at her, including a scalding hot pan. On many occasions, Miss Richard tried to intervene, offering Miss Ventura support and encouragement to leave Mr. Combs. Each time, Mr. Combs learned of her effort to help Miss Ventura, and he became enraged, threatening Miss Richard's life with statements such as, end quote, "You want to die today?" Quote, "I make go missing," and quote, "I end people." Compounding Mr. Combs' violent acts and death threats, he flagrantly exploited Miss Richards' musical talent as a singer and writer, which, while withholding her rightful earnings, stealing her copyrighted works, and subjecting her to years of inhumane working conditions, which included groping, assault, and false imprisonment, among other violations. For nearly a decade, Mr. Combs manipulated Miss Richard with mantras that submission to his depraved demands was necessary for her career advancement, instilling in her the belief that such abuse and exploitation were required for female artists to succeed in the music industry. Miss Richards' feelings of powerlessness, as she increasingly viewed them as part of her professional reality and feared the consequences of any resistance. In a further assertion of power and dominance, Mr. Combs insisted on holding meetings while dressed only in his underwear. Due to the success of her compositions, Miss Richard was invited to meet with musical artist Kalenna Harper, and shortly thereafter, Mr. Combs, Miss Richard, and Miss Harper formed a new group, Diddy Dirty Money. Initially recording for Diddy Dirty Money's album, Last Train to Paris took place in Mr. Combs' home on Doheny Drive in Los Angeles, California. That's the spot that was rated in LA. On the first day of recording, Miss Richard and Miss Harper arrived at Mr. Combs' home and waited in the kitchen where Mr. Combs' girlfriend, Miss Ventura, was frying eggs for him. Miss Richard observed Mr. Combs come down the stairs looking high on drugs, enter the kitchen, approach Miss Ventura, and scream, end quote, "I've been asking you for my I can't stand you. You never do it right." Mr. Combs pushed Miss Ventura against the wall and choked her, then picked up the scalding hot pan of eggs and threw it at her, causing her to fall to the ground in fetal position. That same fetal position that it sounds like that. You remember when she was in that fetal position in the hallway in that video? In the hotel? Cursing and screaming, Mr. Combs dragged Miss Ventura up the stairs. This is so crazy. So this is the first studio session with Dawn and Kalenna for Diddy Dirty Money. They get to the house, and the first time that you're working, you watch your boss assault his girlfriend and artist right in front of you. The following day, Ms. Richard received a call demanding that she return to Mr. Combs' residence to continue recording. Mr. Combs brought Ms. Richard and Ms. Harper into the recording room at his studio, locked the door, dimmed the lights, and gave each of them flowers. You know, real quick, I'm just thinking, I really think I remember Kalenna saying something about calling the people who have come forward about Puff, like saying that they have like, what was it? Something, disgruntled syndrome or something like that. And to hear Dawn's account of Kalenna being right in the mix and getting a front row seat at how it went down is just unreal. Like, I don't know, man. So, cursing and screaming, Mr. Combs dragged Miss Ventura up the stairs. Frozen in shock and terror, Miss Richard heard glass shattering, crashing, and banging noises as Mr. Combs dragged Miss Ventura up the stairs. Miss Richard wanted to intervene and help Miss Ventura, but Miss Harper adamantly refused to interfere in Mr. Combs' relationship and physically led Miss Richard out of the residence. Terrified and shaken, Miss Richard returned to her hotel where she was unable to sleep due to worrying about Miss Ventura and her own safety. The following day, Miss Richard received a call demanding that she return to Mr. Combs' residence to continue recording. Mr. Combs brought Miss Richard and Miss Harper into the recording room at his studio, locked the door, dimmed the lights, and gave each of them flowers. What a mind. Mr. Combs went on at length stating, "This is normal. This was just a lover's argument where no one was hurt. This is what love is. I'm giving you an opportunity. If you want to make it, you'll shut your mouth. If you say anything, there will be consequences." Mr. Combs regularly left the studio and required Miss Richard and Miss Harper to stay and write verses to songs. Occasionally, Miss Richard tried to leave to get something to eat or to go to her hotel. Whenever Miss Richard tried to leave, Mr. Combs would call and demand, "Where the f*** are you?" End quote. And we have an album to make. Yeah, you have an album to make, but you also like have a life to live too. It's work-life balance. Like, it's ridiculous, man. Mr. Combs frequently made threats, especially if they asked for food or rest, stating, quote, "You're a bitch. I don't want to see you face. Quote, I make niggas go missing. I make things go away." Each time, Miss Richard returned to the studio immediately believing that Mr. Combs was capable of following through with his threats. Mr. Combs criticized Miss Richard for being too skinny, quote, yet denied her request for food and demanded that she drink only peanut butter shakes. Mr. Combs had full meals prepared by a chef and ate them in front of Miss Richard and Miss Harper, never offering them food. Miss Richard and Miss Harper begged for food and rest breaks, but Mr. Combs refused, making statements such as, "Absolutely not," and "This is what it takes to be great," quote. Mr. Combs' responses underscored the threat he posed and heightened Miss Richard's concerns for her safety and well-being. All right, let's get into the music industry's Badboy Interscope deal. Mr. Combs had frequent meetings with producer and then CEO of Interscope Records, Jimmy Iovine. On one such occasion, Combs hosted a dinner at a West Hollywood, California restaurant, which Miss Richard and Miss Harper were required to attend. Among the guests at the dinner were celebrities like Neo and Usher, as well as Mr. Iovine. At the dinner, Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura had an argument. In front of dinner guests, Mr. Combs hissed at Miss Ventura in a screaming whisper and forcefully punched her in the stomach, causing her to double over in visible pain, crying at a dinner party in front of everyone. Miss Clark escorted Miss Ventura out of the restaurant, and Mr. Combs remained and continued socializing with dinner guests. At this point, Interscope Records clearly had actual knowledge that Combs was dangerous around females, and that Combs was willing to brazenly batter a female in public. Even after Iveen watched, keyword watched, allegedly. Even after Mr. Iveen watched Mr. Combs commit a violent assault in front of numerous high-profile witnesses, the Badboy Interscope deal took place and remained in effect, providing Mr. Combs with immense financial reward and enabling him to commit further acts of violence without fear of repercussion. Welcome to the big K table. That's the table she had. She had the big K table where all the crazy going down. Abuse towards Miss Ventura. Miss Ventura often wore sunglasses and makeup in an attempt to hide constant reminders of the physical dangers she potentially could and eventually would face. Mr. Combs often exhibited uncontrollable anger during recording sessions, throwing objects like albums, laptops, and food against the wall and at individuals. Mr. Combs frequently flew into frenzied, unpredictable rages. Miss Richard was present when Mr. Combs was introduced to Cassandra Cassie Ventura for the first time, in or around 2006. The moment Mr. Combs first saw Miss Ventura, his demeanor noticeably shifted. Mr. Combs positioned himself directly in front of Miss Ventura's seat, invading her personal space, and fixated on her with an intense, unyielding stare, isolating her from the other people in the room, including Miss Ventura's then boyfriend, music producer Ryan Leslie. Coincidentally, this first meeting between Mr. Combs and Miss Ventura was the first time that Miss Richard was in Mr. Combs' presence without a camera crew filming. Observing Mr. Combs behave in such an intimidating, predatory manner the first time they were off camera made Miss Richard feel deeply apprehensive and afraid of him. Subsequently, Miss Ventura ended her relationship with Mr. Leslie and began dating Mr. Combs, who would become violent and abusive towards her.
I want to thank you very much for watching. It's your boy Andy Appleseed. Andy Appleseed TV is the name of the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe, drop me a comment. We got the latest and greatest hip-hop news commentary by your boy Andy Appleseed. It's going down. Live stream edits, you name it. Hit that like, catch me in the next video. Peace.